I want to talk to you about group work, which is an integral part of this course. Group work is so important to an engineer. In most every employer poll I have seen, employers rate the ability to work in a group as one of the highest desirable skills, along with communication, and usually these are rated much higher than technical skills. In addition, learning to network is one of the most important skills for an engineer, and working in a group is the best way to learn how to foster these abilities. Now let me tell you a little bit about myself. In addition to being a professor, I've been an entrepreneur where my ability to create a cohesive, effective team was critical, and there was little margin for error. I'm also a level C trained soccer coach, where it is pretty obvious that your job is to create a winning team. As a professor as well, I've supervised over 100 student capstone projects involving around 500 students. Almost all of these projects have been successful, but the ones that ran into problems were all because of issues with the dynamics within the group. Now you'll be put into groups of 3 or 4. The reason for this is that research shows that this is the best number for effective teamwork. With 2 group members, you basically don't have enough resources and skill sets. As well, disputes obviously can't be resolved, while the votes will always be tied. On the other hand, having too many members, there will always be a tendency to have members who are passive. I refer to these passive group members as freeloaders. You may also wonder why you're being put into groups randomly. Now, when you are in the workplace, it is rare that you get to choose whom you get to work with. By placing you randomly into groups, you'll learn how to come together quickly with a diverse group of individuals to effectively work together and produce results in a timely manner. Now, in addition to group work in this course, there'll be some activities created to help your group interaction. We'll be sending you out surveys and questionnaires near the start of the course to find out more about you. This may be used to help place you or move you into new groups. Shortly thereafter, you'll be asked to sign a document outlining your duties as a group member. At 2 other points in the term, roughly about a third or 2/3 of the way through the course, you'll be filling out a self-assessment of how your group is functioning. And at the end, we'll also be conducting a peer rating of each other, where you will evaluate how well the other group members contributed to the functioning of your group. At this point, your grades will be adjusted based on these peer ratings. Now let's talk about some tools for you to use in order to understand how to work together, how to keep each other accountable, as well as how to resolve conflicts. Now first, as a member of a group, you will probably fall into one or more of these types of participants. You might be a loner, where you want to just do things by yourself and not work with others. There are the listeners, who are passive participants and stay in the background. You might be the occasional participant. There are those who are frequent participants, and of course, there are the leaders of the group. Now think for a moment which type of group member you think you might be. Now research has shown that your academic performance is directly reflected by the type of group member that you are. As you can see from these graphs on quizzes, the loners, lecturers, and occasional participants did poorly compared to the frequent participants or leaders. On the final exam, this was even more dramatic, where the listeners and occasional participants were absolutely hammered. So, in my opinion, it is in your best interest, even if you might be an introvert, to try to be a frequent participant or even a leader within your group. Now, it is important to have effective teamwork and not just a bunch of individuals working separately and cutting and pasting everything together at the end. Trust me, that kind of project work can be spotted a mile away. Here are some tips to help you avoid this. First, you need to meet regularly as a group. This should be done in person, or if, for example, there's a pandemic, at least video chat. Create group documents, for example, on Google, where you can see not only your own work, but the progress of your teammates. You can also quickly be called in to help your fellow members in a time of need. Now make sure everyone is given clear duties. This is why we are getting you to sign a team agreement at the start of the term. You may also need to rotate roles so that everyone gets a chance to be, for example, a coordinator, a secretary, a leader of a particular part of the project, or any other critical roles. Now, what can often derail a group is if someone dominates everything. This person might be mark hungry or may not trust any other group member to, quote, do it right. What then happens is the other group members become demotivated and stop working hard. Essentially, this steals the learning experience for these group members, who will experience frustration and resentment. It becomes a vicious cycle where the domineering member works even more, gets even more overworked and resentful, and takes over even more of the project. If this is happening, you need to record all interactions. meeting minutes, group documents, emails. Those are the best ways to do this. Then contact the instructor and ask for coaching. It is important to talk to the instructor early, as this problem can be solved with early mediation. The domineering personality must be made to understand that they must have patience to allow the others to get up to speed. In this way, although things may be slow initially, there are benefits down the line when all the group members are now being productive and contributing. As an example, this is what I do as a research supervisor. I could do all the research myself, but I need to patiently wait for my graduate students to take their courses, do their background research, get familiar with how to do research, and then finally contribute to the research. Although it can take a year for this to happen, by the end, there's an entire research team to do this work, producing far more original research than I could ever do alone. At the other end of the spectrum is what to do with a freeloader. These are the members who do very little or even below the minimum, simply coasting on the efforts of the other members, as they feel that they will just simply get whatever the other harder working group members are getting for marks. I'm sure we have all experienced the pain of a freeloader. To deal with this problem, you need to document all interactions just as you would for a domineering group member. Talk to the professor to mediate early. Now, if mediation doesn't work to change the freeloader's behavior, it is quite possible you can, with permission, to leave the student off of a group assignment. You also have the ability, if all else fails, to fire the group member. If that happens, the freeloader will now have to complete all the work on their own. This outcome alone might be enough to deter the freeloader and get them working harder and faster. However, a big mistake made by many groups, particularly if the freeloader is a friend or a very charismatic individual, is that you choose to ignore the freeloader, thinking it's not that important, or he'll eventually rise to the task. In those cases, by not reacting immediately, resentment and dysfunction typically derails the group. In fact, in the capstone projects that I have supervised, this is the most common reason for the entire group to do poorly. Now let's talk about how to have fruitful interaction. This is important, for example, in designing, but becomes even more important when there are disagreements. There's a difference between debate, which is not healthy as a group, and dialogue, which is how effective groups operate. Let's look at this table. So in a group, you can either debate or dialogue. Debate is bad, dialogue is good. So for example, when you debate, you assume there's only one right answer and that you have it. The style is very confrontational, combative. You listen only to try and pick at the other person. And you only critique the other person, not your own views. In fact, you defend your views at all costs. You search for differences rather than similarities. You create a winner-loser. I've got to win this argument. You've got to be wrong. Of course, that just is going to shut things down in terms of a discussion. Debate involves no focus on feelings. You're just trying to belittle or offend. You're not trying to think of what is the other person feeling when I say or do these things. On the other hand, dialogue is how you do want to operate in a group. So when you dialogue, you assume that you're not the only one with the answer or the piece of the answer, that everyone has a piece and you need to work together. The style of dialogue is collaborative. Dialogue also means you listen. You critique everyone's view, but also including your own. Dialogue also allows other people's thinking to improve your own. In other words, you're thinking of how to incorporate that other person's thinking to improve yourself. Dialogue encourages looking for agreement. Dialogue also creates an open end, leaving topics open for further discussion. In other words, you can continue to evolve and grow rather than we're right, you're wrong, and that ends the discussion. Finally, dialogue involves concern for the other person. You are always thinking about what my actions would do to impact your ability to function in the group. Overall, all of these differences between debate and dialogue come down to one word: respect the other person. As we mentioned before, it is important to have regular meetings. At these meetings, it is important to take minutes. Divide everything into tasks or activities. For any activity, make sure someone is assigned to that activity. It doesn't mean that person is the only person working on that activity, but they need to make sure that any deliverables for that activity are done. Attach a timeline to every activity, so it is clear when the deliverables must be presented. If it is not completed, the person needs to give an update at the meeting. At the end of every meeting, you must create action items with deliverables for the next meeting. By doing this, you are creating accountability and nothing will fall through the cracks. One aspect of groups that is sometimes neglected is the team culture. I strongly recommend that you do some type of team building event occasionally, so there is bonding that goes beyond just working on the course. It can be as simple as a few social dinners together, a movie night, or a games night. The benefits of a cohesive, happy team far outweigh the small sacrifice in time away from the actual work of the project. I want to briefly talk about the stages of a group, as this is common terminology that you should be familiar with. The first stage of a group is forming. When a team is forming, members explore group behavior. This is when they decide on roles, for example, choose a leader. The second stage is storming. Members at this point are still inexperienced with working as a team, and much of the energy is focused on each other instead of achieving the goal. Norming is the third stage, where team members accept the team and begin to reconcile differences. The team is able to concentrate more on their work and start to make significant progress. Stage 4 is performing. By this stage, the team members learned what their roles are, the members are open and trusting, and many good ideas are produced because they are not afraid to offer ideas and suggestions. Much is accomplished and team satisfaction and loyalty is high. Adjourning is the final stage where the group wraps up. Finally, I want to comment on conflicts. Conflicts will arise. One thing we do as coaches on the sports field is we often put down a 24-hour rule. Any grievances are given a cooling down period, and after 24 hours, disagreements can often be resolved more productively as cooler heads are prevailing at that point. Another important concept is that feelings are not right or wrong, they just are. You can feel frustration with your teammates, you can feel anger. Feelings are fine. You can acknowledge these feelings, but just do not act on them. You have full control over your actions. You can choose to dialogue rather than debate, argue, or even worse, scream and insult each other. Never forget that in cases of conflict that cannot be resolved internally, you can always seek help from the instructor. So in summary, in the workplace, you will usually work in teams. Understanding group dynamics and how to work effectively is very important to your career. I hope this talk has given you some tools in order to do this effectively. Thank you for your time.